It's time for Arrested DevOps, the podcast that helps you achieve understanding, develop good practices, and operate your team and organization for maximum DevOps awesomeness. I'm Bridget Crumhout with a great show for you today. But first, a word from our sponsors. Okay, through the magic of sponsor editing, sponsors. Okay, so today we're going to talk about Helm and the community. And I would like to introduce our guests, starting with Matt Farina.
Hi, my name is Matt Farina. I work over at Samsung SDS doing Kubernetes and cloud native things. I spend part of my time in upstream, part of my time doing internal stuff. And I've been doing open source software now for greater than 15 years. And so that's a lot of fun.
I do feel like at some point you start saying over 10 years, over 15 years, a while. At some point I'm going to have to stop. I think I have 15 years in there somewhere. At some point I'm going to have to take that out. All right. So welcome, Farina. Karen Chu, tell us about yourself.
Hey there, I'm Karen. I'm a community program manager for Microsoft Azure on the cloud native upstream team. And I joined Microsoft, this has been about 3 years now, through the Deis acquisition.
Excellent. I feel like there's foreshadowing there, like spoiler alert, we're going to talk a little bit about Deis. So, which brings us to Matt Butcher.
Yeah, I'm Matt Butcher. I'm an engineer at Microsoft, also joined via the Deis acquisition with Karen. My team at Microsoft is called Deis Labs. We do the open source development, mainly container-focused work with Kubernetes and, of course, Helm and Brigade and a number of other projects like CNCF that we're super proud of.
Awesome. Love it. Okay, so we got to start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. We'll go with the superhero origin story of Helm. Like, what even is Helm? People have heard of it, but where did it come from? What is the genesis? And Butcher.
Yeah, so the one phrase description we always use when we're talking about what Helm is Helm is the package manager for Kubernetes. So if you think about when you're working on your Linux box or Mac OS or Windows and you want to install a new piece of software, you use a package manager to do it. When we were making our first forays into Kubernetes, we wanted to provide that same kind of experience for the people who were just coming to Kubernetes. We wanted to provide people who are building packages or building software the ability to conveniently package it up, and we wanted to give people who were just starting out on Kubernetes a convenient and easy way to install stuff into Kubernetes. And so that was where we kind of came up with the idea behind behind Helm and behind this whole chart thing. A chart is a package that Helm consumes and can install into a cluster. And as far as the origin goes, it started out as a little tiny project inside of Deis. Karen and I and a couple of other engineers, we were all together at a hackathon project, and this idea just kind of came out of the woodworks. We kicked the tires on it. Wow, that's a lot of metaphors there. I can use a lot of metaphors to describe Helm, but the short version is we wanted to build something that would be generally useful to the community and solve some of the problems we were having as we just got started with Kubernetes. And with a little bit of work, this thing became Helm and took off kind of on its own. And as you know, is now I don't know what 1.8 million downloads a month or something like that. So fairly successful there.
All right, so that is awesome. And I feel like you've told that story before. You'll tell it again. We're not going to go too deep down that rabbit hole today, but I do want to ask, since we don't always have you and Karen in the room at the same time. Hey, Karen, when you were starting to do the community marketing around Helm, did you have an inkling that it was going to become what it did? Like at what moment did you look at this and say, oh, wow, this is actually blowing up?
Definitely not. I mean, I think at that point, like Deis was still like fairly young, having joined Engine Yard. And I think like even for me, like, it was a few years ago and it felt like things were still a bit scrappy, and I'm not saying scrappy is bad. But I think kind of, when you're at a startup and you like start a project from the ground up, like you don't really know where it's going to go. And yeah, like I think for us, no, didn't think it would grow as big as it did. And I mean, I think, like Helm started fairly on along with like when Kubernetes was coming into play as well. And I think a lot of people were also surprised at the direction that, or like the trajectory that Kubernetes took as well.
You were the one who put together the booth and all the original marketing stuff and everything for Helm for the very first KubeCon, right?
Yeah, I worked with Jana on that. But yeah, that I guess I mean, we kind of debuted Helm at the first KubeCon, and I think that was kind of our little taste to see like how this would go. But yeah, even then it was very scrappy. It was like a little turnkey booth. We had our socks. Yeah, I don't even know if we had stickers at that point because the turnaround from like the conception of the project from that hackathon to KubeCon wasn't even that long of time.
Yeah, I think our booth was only like 6 feet by 8 feet or something tiny. KubeCon itself had what, maybe a couple hundred people at it? I don't
Yeah.
remember.
Looking back, hilarious. And I'm curious now, of course, we had a little foreshadowing because we mentioned charts. Farina, do you want to give us a sense of when did you come into this Helm excitement and what is this charts thing that you are bringing to the party? You're muted.
Yes, I realize that. So I came in about 2.5 years ago. 2.5 years ago, I had been watching Helm, and I've known Matt Butcher for over 10 years now. We've done a lot of things together over the years, and I knew about this Helm thing. I've been watching it. Helm was a sub-project of Kubernetes at this point, and I'm one of the co-chairs of SIG Apps that oversaw it. So I was intimately familiar with Helm on this, but I hadn't been a contributor. And then I started contributing in the charts area, and charts was, well, the charts, so the charts repository that we have is a collection of community curated packages, basically. If you wanted MySQL or MariaDB or many other things, this was the community curated ones. In Helm 2, the repository was accessible right out of the box. We've made some changes since then. But it was that, and it started off small and it grew really quickly. And I saw kind of an overwhelming load. And so I started coming in and contributing in charts. And this is just the community curated charts, because when you think about charts, the whole design that they originally had was designed so just like apt repositories in Debian apt, different people could have their own repositories and use them in many different ways. It was like that, but we still had this community curated one. And so I stepped in to start trying to automate what was very much a manual process at the time, because it looked painful to do all this manual curation over and over and over, and that killed me.
I love it. It's like automate all the things. That is a wonderful choice.
Yeah, when we first started the chart repository, we had hypothesized that we would have somewhere between 12 and maximum maybe 30 charts in there. And when it started taking off, I, as one of the core maintainers on the code, I had no idea what to do with all these PRs that were coming in and the changes, because I'm not really as much of an operational person. So when Matt and I think probably at the time you joined, Matt, there were probably 3 or 4 other chart maintainers, and there have been over a dozen, I think, over time, right? But when you picked it up, it was probably around 15 or 20 charts, and I don't even know how many we have in there now.
So there were a few more maintainers. There were probably 7 or 8 when I jumped in, and there weren't as many charts, but it very quickly grew. It was probably 50 charts when I came in, somewhere around there, but it had grown to hundreds of charts in the repository. And so you've got to think, people coming through with small changes, additions, feature additions, updates to readmes across hundreds of different charts, and then you're manually checking these out. And sometimes it's YAML that's changing, and does it actually validate in Kubernetes? How does all this work? And so it's one of those areas where when I came in, so we had this guy, Reinhard, who was this amazing charts maintainer. He had all of these things. Like if he reviewed a chart, you trusted his reviews. And that's where I went to learn from. And my first thought was, I can't do what he does manually. So I started automating it. I captured what he did and started automating it in the repo. And so this will be a quick tangent here. And so we created all of this automation where we linted charts and we linted pull requests, and then we actually tested them in live clusters to make sure everything installed. And it became this wonderful test suite built around what he had done as a manual process. And we actually broke that out into an independent tool called chart testing. And that now the charts repository consumed, but we turned it into something others could consume as well. And so now this is one of the things the chart team offers to people who self-host repositories, is this wonderful tool called chart testing that lints your YAML. It can test different configurations of your charts being installed into a cluster if you expect customers to do things in different ways, or users. It's got all kinds of neat features. And it's driven by the charts folks in automating what used to be manual processes.
That is very actionable. And so we'll definitely have a link in the show notes. I say that so that we actually do when Joe edits this. So I want to make sure that we're talking really quick about, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I wanted to piggyback one more thing on there, because I think there were really 4 distinct phases of how that whole charts story unfolded. The first was kind of the Wild West days when we started the repository and thought, oh, this will be great. And then with Matt and with Bitnami and with Reinhard, the second phase started, where we went from, oh, this is a chart, throw anything in here and we'll just package it up and release it, to here are some good design patterns. I remember Matt and Reinhard and Adnan from Bitnami produced this documentation for best practices for chart development, and I read it and learned a bunch. I'm like, I shouldn't be learning things about the software I wrote from this, but it was great. It was the first time that I really started to understand the rigor through which these maintainers examined the charts. And then the third phase was the one Matt alluded to or described strongly, this kind of turn from manual checking into automated tooling. And then the last one, and the one that I think we should all be most proud of in this regard, is that that tooling became generic to the point where other people would be able to use it. So we had gone from a Wild West repository to some canonical guidelines that could be programmatically applied to anyone's chart repository.
And along the way, as it went from the Wild West to this, we actually saw a neat transition, right? So charts started off there. Charts have templates for Kubernetes manifests inside of them. And the values and the replacement for the templatizing was very much Kubernetes structured and thought, just basic replacements for Kubernetes variables, so to speak, Kubernetes properties. And it actually grew into having business logic and design patterns around the chart so you could encapsulate things. So for example, you could specify, here's the URL that we want to expose an application at. And then all of the things that needed to be created to do that around it would then be created and configured for you, sticking the kinds of values in the right places. It wasn't so much a replacement pattern, it was logic inside of those charts to simplify your work as somebody who has to go install it.
That is fantastic, because I think what you're describing is, it's applicable to so many things. It's applicable to, I'm hearing the story of scaling and increasing your impact. And the thing that Butcher said that stuck with me is, I created this and yet I don't really know what's happening with it. And that's actually a good thing. And that's making me think, I want to actually ask Karen about contrast, like the first Helm Summit with even the next Helm Summit that we did with CNCF support. Like, what did that kind of scale from small, indie, scrappy to, hey, this is actually a little more? Can you talk a little bit about that scaling experience?
Yeah, so for the first Helm Summit, I did that right after, or like a little bit after we had gotten acquired, but this was before we became a CNCF project. Again, I'm going to use the word scrappy here. It was a little bit scrappy, and I guess in a sense like modest, in terms of like, doing all the like sponsor stuff, the venue stuff, like figuring out the schedule and all that. And then once we moved into becoming a CNCF project and having that support from CNCF, it definitely offloaded a lot of like the logistical work, and like in terms of like, again, like the like schedule and CFP and stuff. But I think having that work offloaded to a group that obviously, is very experienced in this space gave us a little bit more like it gave us back some resources to focus on other things. And I think in terms of like even though we like handed this to CNCF to kind of help execute, at the same time, like we were able to take some of the lessons we had learned from like the first conference and like apply it back. And so I think like between the two conferences, like obviously you can see that it's a bit more scaled, but I think we try to keep some consistent matters there as well, in terms of like just like the nature of the conference not being very salesy, being very technical, and also just like yeah, not being flashy. It's a weird thing to like focus on, but yeah, like we try to make it, like about the technology and not necessarily like the glitzy parts of conferences. But again, yeah, I think just utilizing the resources that came from CNCF, like in that sense, that like allowed us to scale to a bigger audience, but at the same time, like by keeping in mind kind of like what our true message and like efforts were focused on, we were able to keep things consistent while scaling.
Yeah, I actually want to say the first Helm Summit was one of my favorite conferences that I've been to. And it was actually because there were different style tracks. There were different time limits for speakers. There was roundtable time. It was this great opportunity to hear technical talks from a wide variety of people who develop it, people who use it. And yet we still had a small enough intimate setting where we could talk to each other. And it's a major contrast from the CNCF conferences today that have, well over 10,000 people, right? And to have that small, intimate gathering where people could just talk and dig in and hear real world stories. And it didn't have that overly vendor feel. It had that very much, we're people who are getting stuff done and being useful feel. And it was fun. So I give props to Karen. That was an amazing conference.
Nice.
Yay. I just want to add on to that, like with our second conference, like even though we had more resources, I think even just like trying to keep towards the small intimate setting, like we didn't try to like upscale this to, like 1,000 people. It was still definitely a smaller group trying to hold that same culture that we had with the first conference. Yeah.
Right. So that's really important, right? Like maintaining the sense and the feel of your community wherever you're taking it. But, and this is, I think, one of the core questions of open source that I think you folks have some really good insight into, which is, okay, cool, your open source project is really popular and now it's huge and your issue queue is full and people have lots of drive-by PRs for things where you're like, I know we said pull requests accepted, but what is this? Like, how do you connect with the community when the community is variegated and wants many things, and some of those things are confusing and vexing? Like, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that?
I thought one of the things that was the most delightful about Helm when we started was that the community was small and also highly motivated to just explore and experiment and try and figure out what we were all collectively going to make out of this Kubernetes thing and this cloud native thing. So you got a bunch of eager explorers who are willing to try something out and then try and work with you to figure it out. And we used to do some really fun things like, we used to be able to pair with people who were having problems and kind of just go through on a Zoom call or on a Slack. Hey, okay, tell me about your cluster. Let's try this. Let's try that. And it was a lovely feeling. I enjoyed it very much. It's really hard to scale some of that behavior up and make. I on very, very rare occasion might get the opportunity to sit down with someone and look deeply into the way they're using Helm. More often, it feels like the time to make the donuts commercial where it's like time to check the issue queue, time to check the issue queue. And you're just kind of going through, scrambling as fast as you can. And we got to the point of where the issues felt like dialogues to really the first few interactions are almost robotic, right? Can you provide more information? Can you fill out all the fields on the template and not just 2 of them? That kind of thing until you can actually dive in. And I found that to be a very disconnecting experience. Hard to deal with. And I know some of the things we've tried to do is maintain a really positive Slack channel where people can ask comfortable questions and even if they don't know, still feel like it's a safe place to ask. But definitely for me, the biggest psychological, I would even say emotional challenge of Helm has been trying to learn how to deal with the volume while still looking at each person, each issue that comes in as being filed by a person with some needs, often filing the issue out of frustration because they don't file issues when they're happy with something. So.
Okay, that is true. I think most people don't go to an open source project and find the issue button, the open new issue button. I love your software. So what do you think, Farina? How do we continue to go a trajectory of good curation and response?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard one. You talked about people showing up with pull requests and going, what are they doing? And I think this is one of the things, and I'll credit Butcher for this, is keeping us focused on what Helm does. It's not trying to take over the world and do everything else. And so when people have other ideas like we should do this and add this and that, we try to encourage them, say, you know what, that's not a Helm thing, but you could do it as a Helm plugin because Helm has the ability to have plugins, or you could wrap Helm and have your own application. Give that a shot. And if you do that, we have a place where we'll list your related projects so people can know about it. This isn't, a feature to go into Helm. We draw the line because it's important not just to do everything, to dump everything. It's not a junk drawer. But to actually say, this is an idea and encouraging others to build out their thing and share it and build upon Helm or work with Helm in the appropriate ways. I think that's a really useful aspect of this, is that extensibility in that thought. But, again, the issue queue becomes a thing because as Helm became popular, we get more and more generic Kubernetes questions in there that have nothing to do with Helm, but are about Kubernetes and its complexity. And I don't have a good way to solve that. I mean, we have somebody who goes through, we actually assign somebody to go through every week and be the triage person who's going to go look at the issues, triage them, and respond to people to try to have that engagement, because with so many, you've kind of got to sign up for it and focus on it and put real effort into it. But that's hard. It's really hard to do that. And I think the best thing we can do is write better documentation and hope people read it and then point people to it.
I was just
But
going
I'm
to
open
say,
to ideas.
no, that's actually a really good point. And I was actually, I work on the same team as Karen at Microsoft. We both work for Lockie Evenson. And I was just talking with him in my one-on-one this week about how I put a couple of PRs in, just doing a few doc updates for Helm. And I thought, I need to do more of this. And we need to do more of this in general. And he agrees, because it's like, if some of these people opening issues found a doc that answered their question, they probably wouldn't open an issue. Or maybe they would open an issue and tell us how great we are. That would be kind of fun. So I'm curious, actually, as this project has progressed, one of the things that has changed is the involvement with the CNCF. And some of I imagine people who are listening to this in our audience might have questions about, what does that look like when you become a CNCF project? They might have listened to the CNCF webinar that we did for Helm earlier this year. I'm wondering, Karen, since I happen to know you're an ambassador, if you can tell us a little bit about what talking about your project in general does, and give us spoilers as to whether or not it brings new contributors or people who might give pull requests.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like utilizing the CNCF to kind of like help spread the word about your project. I mean, obviously, like they have a huge like community and audience, and I think like working with them has given us a lot of opportunities, and some that we either like knew about from the beginning or didn't. And I think that's one of the things I want to like kind of share with people about like, you know, getting your project into the CNCF. Because like for us, obviously we were doing a lot of like on the ground things as much as we could before, but with the CNCF, like, with the CNCF webinar, like those are opportunities you get being part of it. And those are all like online webinars that happen quarterly. And like us going to conferences like KubeCon, like they provide support. Like as of lately, they've started doing project pavilions, which are spaces dedicated to CNCF projects. And so at the last KubeCon in San Diego, we had like a Helm dedicated booth. And that was really cool because like a lot of times you have projects that, like a lot of projects are the work of like multiple companies, but like there may not be like a central booth dedicated to that project. And so like for us at Microsoft, like there's no clear home booth at the booth or like at our booth per se. And like, even if there was, it's kind of this weird feeling of like, well, like, we have people like Matt Farina who like help work on their project. And like, it'd be weird if he like showed up at the Microsoft Helm booth, right? So like, having a project pavilion booth provides like a neutral space, and I think like makes it clear that like this is the one spot that you can come and talk to people about Helm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then I'm trying to think of other things. I mean, obviously, like I said earlier, like having like doing our own Helm summit these past few years has also been a great opportunity, because again, like you're bringing in the people who know that this is like a focused conversation, and yeah.
So of course, now that we're at this point in 2020, I have to say everything is not necessarily going to be travel and conferences right now. What are you thinking? And I'm interested because I know Butcher has an idea somewhere in this realm. What are you thinking is our best path or best recommendation right now for people who want to connect?
Matt, were you going to say something earlier? Sorry, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I wasn't going to answer that question directly, but I think that if I say what I was planning on saying, it might lead in the right direction, maybe. Because I was going to point out that I thought that Helm Pavilion and the Helm Summits too, but those have been the opportunities where having a successful project, I expressed earlier, it's frustrating to feel overwhelmed by the issue queue, but those are the opposite experiences where you feel like you've got time allocated, where the absolute best thing you can do, where there are no distractions pulling you in different directions, is to stand there and talk to people. And, we talked, we deep dived with people into the internals of the template engine, would turn around and someone would walk up and say, I'm really frustrated with this like Kubernetes Helm. I don't understand it. This whole conference is overwhelming me. And I get to talk to someone about that. It was fabulous. And I would love finding environments where we could replicate that kind of experience, to once again connect with the people as people and not people as problem statements in an issue queue.
Yeah, and the project and the pavilion, right? That was one of the most fascinating things to me, because I got to see people who had issues and I could help with. There were people who came by just to say thank you. You don't see that in issue queues. You don't see that other places. And we had that. And it was an opportunity to meet people from other projects or people who just wanted to come brainstorm on ideas around it. And as an engineer who loves to solve problems, having a problem and brainstorming around those things with other people who are excited and interested, that's a lot of fun, right? And Karen, you did one of the most wonderful things in organizing us to always have somebody from the Helm project at the pavilion. And where some of the tables were empty, you actually organized us intelligently to have somebody there. And we've got project maintainers on Helm from, we've got over 20 of them from over 10 companies. So that's a lot of people to organize who are at the conferences who get a chance to experience all three of those things, which I think are just wonderful for us and the people who are looking for that.
That is awesome. And I have an idea that I just just came to me right now. And I'm going to put it out here live. And I'm totally making new work for Karen. Sorry, Karen. Congratulations, Karen, because I think we need to have the Helm drive-by, drop-in office hours, the distinct from the maintainer call. This is kind of like the TGIK thing, but maybe not quite as focused, because instead of just being a presentation, I'm thinking happy helming or some such. And it's basically the Helm happy hour, drop-in, talk, whatever, Thursday afternoon, whatever you want it to be, talk about Helm. Replicate that serendipitous experience.
Yeah, the feel good experience. I mean, I think as of these days, like there are so many virtual conferences going on.
Sure.
Right. And it's just like popping in, listening to people talk. But I mean, in terms of like, stuff that I've done, like with our team and just like socially, right. It's like, it's nice to have these breaks where you like show up and there's no like clear agenda necessarily, but to like feel better and relax. And and I think that would, it'd be probably like the optimal way these days to like be reminded as to like why we work on this stuff.
Helm happy hour.
Well, an interesting angle to this is when you do the virtual conferences, you've got somebody who knows a lot of the stuff telling other people about the things that they've made and use, right? It's not a two-way interaction. You don't get to hear from people. It puts the speakers kind of isolated, telling other people their things. And when you're at a real conference, you've got the hallway track and you can intermix with people. The virtual conferences, I'm not sure how they're going to do that well. But I think with this kind of virtual happy hour, what I really like about it is it's not somebody lecturing or teaching or telling. It's somebody who can just listen to others and have two-way conversations. And I think that's vital because a community is a lot of people, not some people who know lecturing others.
Yeah, love it. And also, I feel like as Helm, approaches graduation and is very popular, there's a lot of stuff on the agenda in the, community calls to the point where we can't necessarily just sit and shoot the shit as much. And so this could be an opportunity for that could fill that void in our hearts. So, okay, I have a fun / optional question, which is, we'll have a link in the show notes to Fippy and Friends, which are the absolutely adorable, Kubernetes characters. And I'm just curious if anybody wants to answer this question, which is, which character in the Fippy and Friends gang do you identify with the most? And I'm totally going to look at Butcher.
Oh no, Karen should totally get to answer this first, because the visuals behind all of this stuff was Karen's brainchild. So
fantastic. All right, Karen.
I want to say Z, just because like Z was like kind of in this position to like, or like in a position where like she didn't know a lot, and like she went on this journey to like learn about all the different animals, at least like in the last book, right? And so I feel like I identify with Z because I'm full of questions, to the point where like I feel like people are often overwhelmed by me asking questions, and so I feel like the inquisitive version of me like lives on through Z.
I love that. And honestly, I think asking questions honestly and openly and caring about the answer is a superpower, because people love to answer questions about them and themselves and their things. And I'm totally going to look at you now, Butcher, and say, who do you identify with?
Well, in the second book, there were the pods who just run around and carry stuff around until they die. That feels like me, at least today. But probably, when I wrote the original story, the sort of background in my mind was, how would I explain to my own kids what Kubernetes is? And at the time, my daughter's favorite animal was owls, which is where Captain Kubi came from. And so I guess that's probably the character that I associate most with, because, in my mind originally, Fippy was, my daughter saying, "What is it exactly that you do, Dad?" And me being like, "Well, this is what I do, and I'm trying not to make it sound boring for you."
Nice. I love it. All right, Farina, you wanna give us your insights?
So I probably identify with Fippy. And there's two reasons for that. One of my daughters, giraffes are her favorite animal. In fact, I actually had to sew an ear back onto a ratty old one earlier this week. But the other reason is I have a secret that a lot of people don't know. I used to do a lot of PHP work. And so
Ooh.
Phippy being a PHP application still kind of pulls to me. And I know I'm not the only Matt on this call who's done a lot of PHP.
I was wondering if you were going to out me at the end of that. Yes. Yes, Phippy
Yeah,
named
sorry, I
after
outed you.
PHP. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, our first working experience together was doing Drupal development, Matt and I.
Yeah.
And everybody got us confused then too.
They did. So
You're quite distinct.
we weren't so distinct this winter when I also had a beard. But yeah, so I do identify with Phippy because of that history of touching that language.
Okay, I love it because this is actually perfect since Goldie is the character who's left, and I have two reasons to identify with Goldie. One, I went to the University of Minnesota. Their mascot is Goldie Gopher. Goldie Gopher is terrifying because it's literally a person in like a human-shaped sized gopher costume, and it was giant, and it would like come up to you sometimes on the quad and want to like take pictures with you. It was just, yeah. So I was avoiding and terrified of. And then when I joined the cloud developer advocacy team that I was originally on at Microsoft before I became a PM, I was mostly with a whole, Ashley McNamara and a whole bunch of other Go people. And so suddenly everything was all about Goldie. And I'm just like, what? No. Oh, it's sweet. It's adorable. I actually kind of love it. So that made me happy. And also it's so little and blue and adorable. So inclusion, I think we love all of Phippy and their friends, which is sweet. And okay, we gotta end, you always gotta end with call to action. Where, and we'll put links in the show notes, where would all y'all recommend people go and check out and learn more?
Helm.sh is the number one place. And one of the things that we are, and Matt Farina, I know, is passionate about this, so we'll probably mention it. One of the things we are very much trying to do now is to increase the accessibility of our documentation. So if that's something you are passionate about, that is a great place to dive in. And you don't even have to know anything about Helm when you start, because it's basically you read the documentation, learn it for yourself, and re-express it in languages and ways that will appeal to a broader audience.
Yeah. I guess the next one that I would say is if you're looking for charts, go to hub.helm.sh, because you can find charts that people have created, both ones that are part of the community and those created by other organizations who are sharing and managing them themselves.
Nice. And Karen, what do you think people should check out?
Check out our Twitter account. It is @HelmPack. For the most up-to-date information whenever we do updates, things like that. It's a more real-time version than more like the official stuff that you might want to look at would live on at like the helm.sh blog.
Fantastic. So just to wrap up, I'm going to tell people, head to arresteddevops.com/helm-community for this episode's show notes. Visit arresteddevops.com/iTunes and leave us a review in the iTunes store if you want to help other people find the podcast. Side note, I have no idea how that works. I'm guessing they must have some kind of algorithm that waits if people have been reviewing it lately. But wait, do they have to be like many starred reviews, or do you show up if you've been getting a whole bunch of 1-star reviews? I don't know. But we're also on Spotify and iHeartRadio if you're into those. Thank you so much to Matt and Karen and Matt for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks, Bridget.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent. I'm Bridget at Bridget Krumhout. This is Arrested DevOps. And remember, there's always DevOps in the banana stand.